Welcome to an unforgettable story that begins with a seemingly routine traffic stop but quickly escalates into a dramatic confrontation with far-reaching consequences. Officer Jenny Thompson and her partner, Tom Stevens, are cruising the city streets when Tom's blatant racism leads them to pull over a well-dressed black woman. As Tom's prejudiced behavior unfolds, tension mounts and Jenny finds herself caught between her duty and her conscience. What starts as a routine check turns into a shocking encounter with a surprising twist that no one saw coming. Watch as Jenny makes a courageous stand that exposes corruption and sparks a pivotal moment of change. From tense beginnings to a dramatic climax, this story will leave you on the edge of your seat. If you are not subscribed, I recommend you subscribe and activate the bell so you don't miss any videos. Officer Jenny Thompson and her partner, Tom Stevens, patrolled the city streets in their cruiser. The air was thick with tension as Tom vented his frustrations about recent shifts in the police department's hierarchy. Can you believe they promoted one of them to captain? Tom's voice dripped with contempt, his grip on the steering wheel tight enough to turn his knuckles white. This department's on a downward spiral. Jenny shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Though she had only been on the force for a few months, Tom's overt racism and harsh criticisms unsettled her. Maybe we should give the new captain a fair chance, she suggested, trying to inject a note of reason into the conversation. Tom's response was immediate and dismissive. "You're just being naive," Tom scoffed. "They're all the same. You can't trust any of them." As they turned onto Main Street, Tom's attention was suddenly caught by a sleek black sedan gliding smoothly through the traffic. The driver, a poised and impeccably dressed black woman, adhered to every traffic regulation, but something about her presence set Tom on edge. "Look at that car," Tom muttered, his voice laced with suspicion. "I bet she stole it." Jenny frowned, her instincts telling her that the woman's only crime was her choice of vehicle and her appearance. "Sir," Jenny said, her voice firm despite her unease, "we don't have any reason to suspect she's done anything wrong. She's following the rules." Tom's disapproving grunt was the only reply as he flicked on the cruiser's lights and pulled the sedan over. The situation was about to escalate in ways that neither officer could have anticipated. "That's what you think," Tom replied with a hint of malice as he flipped on the patrol car's lights. The black sedan complied smoothly, pulling over to the curb. Jenny watched as the driver's shoulders tensed up, her unease growing with every passing second. Tom, oblivious to her concerns, exited the patrol car with a smirk that suggested he was relishing the moment. Jenny followed reluctantly, her stomach knotting with anxiety. As they approached the sedan, the driver's window rolled down to reveal a composed yet wary woman. Her eyes flicked between Tom and Jenny, a mixture of apprehension and dignity in her gaze. "Is there a problem, officers?" she inquired with a calm that seemed at odds with the situation. "License and registration," Tom ordered curtly, his voice tinged with barely concealed contempt. The woman, her hands trembling slightly, handed over her documents with a quiet resignation. Jenny noticed the subtle tremor in her hands, a sign of the stress she was under. "Elaine Davis," Tom read aloud, his voice carrying an edge of disdain. He then leveled a piercing look at her. "And what brings you to this part of town, Miss Davis?" "I'm heading to a meeting," Elaine answered with a measured tone. "Could you tell me why I've been pulled over?" Jenny's heart sank as she saw Tom's demeanor shift from professional to confrontational. The situation was quickly spiraling out of control, and Jenny couldn't shake the feeling that it was about to take a turn for the worse. Tom's eyes narrowed into slits as he fixed his gaze on Elaine. "We ask the questions here. Step out of the vehicle," he commanded with a steely edge to his voice. Elaine's hesitation was palpable as she flicked a worried glance at Jenny, who could barely meet her eyes, her face etched with a mixture of guilt and shame. After a moment of hesitation, Elaine complied, opening the car door with a deliberate slowness that seemed to echo the mounting tension. Jenny's heart raced, her apprehension growing with each passing second. She felt a profound sense of wrongness about the situation but found herself paralyzed, unsure of how to intervene or change the course of events. Tom, taking on an air of authority that bordered on menacing, began his questioning with a tone that left little room for cooperation. His demeanor was anything but friendly as he circled Elaine's car with the predatory precision of a hawk. His gaze was sharp, every movement calculated, as he scrutinized the vehicle for any sign that could justify escalating the situation. "Nice ride you've got here, Mrs. Davis," Tom sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Care to explain how someone like you manages to afford a vehicle like this?" Elaine took a deep breath, her composure a stark contrast to Tom's aggressive demeanor. "I work hard for my money, officer," she responded, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "I'm on my way to an important meeting. Could you please tell me the reason for this stop?" Tom, however, chose to ignore her question, his hand resting ominously on the grip of his holster. "Mind if we take a look inside?" he asked, his tone leaving no room for argument. Elaine stood her ground, her resolve unwavering. "I do mind, actually," she said firmly, her voice imbued with a quiet strength. "I haven't done anything wrong, and I do not consent to a search." Tom's expression darkened, his face contorting with visible frustration. It was clear that he wasn't accustomed to being challenged, and his anger was palpable as he prepared to escalate the situation further. Little did they know, this seemingly routine traffic stop was on the brink of turning their lives upside down in ways they could not yet imagine. "Oh, I see you've got something to hide, don't you?" Without any prior warning, he yanked the car door open with a harsh screech and started rifling through the interior of the vehicle. Elaine took a step forward, ready to intervene and protest the unwarranted search. However, Jenny quickly positioned herself between them, a look of alarm on her face. "Sir, please, you need to step back," Jenny implored, her voice quivering with a mix of fear and urgency. As Tom continued his search with an air of authority, he covertly retrieved a small bag of white powder from his pocket and carefully slid it under the driver's seat. Jenny caught the movement out of the corner of her eye, her pulse quickening as she processed the gravity of what was unfolding before her. This wasn't merely an instance of racial profiling, this was an orchestrated setup. If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 1 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. With a triumphant flourish, Tom emerged from the car, brandishing the bag of powder. "Well, well, well," he declared, his tone dripping with satisfaction. "Look what we have here." Elaine's eyes widened in shock and disbelief, her face draining of color. "That's not mine. You just planted that," she exclaimed, her voice a mixture of desperation and anger. Tom's lips curled into a smug grin. "Looks like we've got ourselves a drug dealer," he said with a tone of finality. "You're under arrest." As he reached for his handcuffs, Elaine's composed exterior finally shattered. "This is outrageous. I'm telling you, that's not mine," she protested vehemently. Jenny's stomach churned with revulsion. She was witnessing a gross abuse of power, a deliberate act of corruption. Her father's words echoed in her mind with haunting clarity. A true officer of the law is meant to protect and serve everyone equally, not just those who fit a certain profile. The tension in the air was almost unbearable, crackling with a sense of impending crisis. Elaine, her face etched with fear and desperation, turned to Jenny, her eyes pleading for intervention. "Officer, you saw what happened. You need to tell him this isn't right," she implored, her voice trembling with a mix of hope and dread. Tom, his face hardened into a scowl, whirled around, his eyes locked onto Jenny with a mix of irritation and menace. "Don't you dare listen to her, rookie," he snapped, his tone dripping with authority. "This is how we clean up the streets, by any means necessary." His words hung heavy in the air, a grim declaration of his unyielding stance. Jenny stood motionless, caught in a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. Her mind raced as she grappled with the gravity of the moment, torn between her duty to support her partner and her moral obligation to uphold the principles of justice. The weight of the decision bore down on her shoulders, pressing her to choose between conformity and conscience, a choice that could irrevocably alter the trajectory of her career and possibly her entire life. As Tom advanced with the intent to handcuff Elaine, the situation became increasingly volatile, poised on the brink of eruption. The seconds stretched interminably, each tick of the clock amplifying the stakes. Jenny's heart pounded as she watched Tom's hand inch toward his handcuffs, a sight that seemed to slow time itself. Memories surged through her mind like a tidal wave: her father's proud, approving smile on the day she graduated from the police academy, the countless tales of integrity and honor she had absorbed throughout her upbringing, and the solemn oath she had taken to protect and serve with unwavering fidelity. In that pivotal moment, the future hung in the balance, and Jenny's decision would not only determine the fate of an innocent woman, but also test the very essence of her commitment to the ideals she had sworn to uphold. "Stop!" Jenny's voice cut through the tension like a knife, its unexpected sharpness startling even herself. Tom froze mid-motion, his hand hovering just inches from Elaine's wrist, his expression a mix of surprise and simmering anger. "What did you just say?" Rookie Tom's voice was laced with incredulity, struggling to mask his rising fury. "I said stop, officer. This isn't right, and deep down, you know it," Jenny insisted, her tone unwavering as she stood her ground. Tom's face twisted into a grimace of rage, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "You listen to me, you little punk," Tom growled, his voice seething with years of authority. "I've been on this force longer than you've been breathing. You don't get to lecture me on what's right or wrong." "Maybe that's true," Jenny replied firmly, her stance resolute despite the pressure. "But I know what I saw. You planted that evidence. This woman is innocent." Elaine, who had been tense and silent throughout the encounter, now held a flicker of hope in her eyes, her gaze fixed on the unfolding confrontation. Tom's voice dropped to a threatening rumble, his demeanor darkening. "You're making a colossal mistake," Kitty warned, his menace palpable. "I can end your career right here, right now. Is that really what you want?" For a brief moment, a seed of doubt took root in Jenny's mind. Ever since she was a child, she had dreamed of becoming a police officer, envisioning herself as a beacon of justice and a force for positive change. She had dedicated countless hours to her training, endured rigorous tests, and faced numerous challenges, all with the hope of making a real difference. Now, faced with a critical decision, she wondered if she was truly prepared to risk all that she had worked so hard to build. Could she throw away her career for the sake of one person? As her thoughts swirled with uncertainty, Jenny glanced at Elaine. The woman's eyes were wide with fear and desperation, a reflection of the gravity of the situation and her vulnerability. At that moment, Jenny's doubts were overshadowed by a profound sense of duty. She knew she could not abandon Elaine in her time of need. "If standing up for what's right means losing my job, then so be it," Jenny said firmly, her voice steady and unyielding. "I refuse to be part of this charade and let injustice prevail." Tom's face turned a deep shade of red, his anger barely contained as he thrust his finger into Jenny's chest. "You're done, you hear me? Done. I will make sure you never wear a badge again. You can count on that." Jenny stood her ground, her expression resolute. "Go ahead, Tom. Do what you have to do, but I'm not moving from this spot. And you are not arresting this woman on false charges." The air between the two officers crackled with intense hostility. Tom's rage was palpable, and the tension seemed almost tangible. Elaine, realizing the precariousness of the situation, seized the opportunity to intervene. "Officers, please," Elaine interjected, her voice trembling but determined. "There's no need for this to escalate further. We can resolve this situation peacefully and with respect for everyone involved." Tom whirled on Elaine with a scowl, his irritation boiling over. "Shut your mouth. You don't have any say in this matter." Jenny, finding a surge of courage and resolve, stepped closer to Tom. She placed a hand firmly on his shoulder, trying to physically and metaphorically pull him back from the brink. "That's enough," she said with authority. "She has rights, and you're in clear violation of them." Tom reacted with hostility, shoving Jenny's hand away with a rough push. "You're making the biggest mistake of your life, kid. Don't think for a second that I won't report this blatant act of insubordination." His voice was laced with menace, a clear threat that underscored the seriousness of the situation. Jenny stood her ground, her father's words resonating powerfully in her mind. "I'd rather lose my job than lose my integrity," she declared, her voice steady despite the chaos around her. The tension in the air was palpable as the confrontation escalated. Neither Tom nor Jenny realized that this moment was more than just a heated exchange. It was about to become a turning point with repercussions far beyond this isolated traffic stop. Jenny's unwavering stance against injustice was poised to ignite a series of events that would challenge the very core of their police department and ripple through their community. Onlookers in passing cars slowed down, their curiosity piqued as they watched the drama unfold on the roadside. Elaine, facing a critical juncture with no apparent exit, chose to take a bold gamble. "Officers," she said, her voice steady and authoritative, "I think there's something crucial you both need to know." Tom's response was a sneer, his arrogance barely masked. "Save it for the judge, pal." Elaine, undeterred, continued with a commanding presence. "I am Captain Elaine Davis, the new head of your precinct." Her declaration hung in the air, its weight undeniable. The impact was immediate. Tom's confident demeanor evaporated as his face went pale, while Jenny's eyes widened in astonishment. "That's impossible," Tom stammered, his previously unshakable bravado now crumbling in the face of the unexpected revelation. Elaine moved deliberately, her hand sliding slowly into her jacket pocket. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and the officer's eyes followed her every movement with a mixture of anxiety and apprehension. For a fleeting, breathless moment, it seemed as though she might produce something far more alarming. The silence was nearly unbearable as the tension reached its peak. But as Elaine drew her hand out, it was not a weapon but her badge and identification that emerged. She held them up with a calm and resolute demeanor, her expression a mask of quiet authority. "I was en route to headquarters for a critical meeting with the commissioner when you decided to pull me over," she said, her voice carrying a weight of unspoken disappointment and frustration. Jenny's hands trembled slightly as she took the badge and ID, her gaze locked onto the identification as if trying to process the enormity of what it represented. She passed the documents to Tom, whose face drained of color as he grasped the reality of his actions. His hands shook uncontrollably, and his eyes widened with a mix of fear and regret. The gravity of his mistake was sinking in, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. I didn't know," Tom said, his voice faltering as the realization of his blunder struck him with brutal clarity. Elaine's eyes, though filled with a steely resolve, softened just enough to convey the deep sense of betrayal she felt. "Would it have changed anything if you had known?" Should it? Every person, irrespective of their rank or skin color, deserves to be treated with fundamental respect and dignity, she said, her voice laced with a profound sense of disillusionment. The words hung heavy in the air, a stark reminder of the principles that should have guided their actions. Desperation clung to Tom as he struggled to find a way out of the escalating crisis. "Captain, please, I can explain. We've been receiving countless reports about drug trafficking in this area." Elaine's interruption was swift and final, her tone cutting through the excuses like a knife. "Save your justifications. I saw you deliberately plant those drugs in my car, officer. And Officer Thompson here was a witness to the entire incident, wasn't he?" Her voice, though calm, carried an undercurrent of raw anger and disappointment, revealing the depth of her dismay at the betrayal of those who were sworn to uphold the law. Jenny's face revealed a complex mixture of relief and steely resolve as she met Elaine's gaze. "Yes, Captain, I did," she said, her voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. There was a deep sense of liberation in her admission, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders, but also a resolve to stand firmly on the side of justice. Tom's face darkened with a storm of rage as he turned his fury on Jenny. The betrayal he felt was palpable, and his voice dripped with venom. "You little rat," he spat, his eyes seething with betrayal. "After everything I've taught you, after all the years I've invested in mentoring you, you're going to side with her." Jenny remained resolute, her gaze unflinching. Her voice was steady and resolute as she responded, "I'm siding with the truth." The words were a declaration of her moral stance, a stand against the corruption she had witnessed. Elaine stepped in between them, her presence a calm but unyielding barrier to Tom's outburst. "That's enough." Officer Tom. Elaine's voice was like steel, cutting through the chaos with a clarity that brooked no argument. "Your actions today have not only breached department policy but have also violated the law. Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty. Hand over your badge and gun." If you are still watching this video and find these stories useful, please comment number 2 below to let me know that you are still watching this video with me. Thank you for your valuable time. The impact of Elaine's words hit Tom with the force of a sledgehammer. His face contorted with a primal mixture of rage and disbelief, his entire body trembling with the intensity of his emotions. "You can't do this to me," he bellowed, his voice cracking under the weight of his fury and desperation. "I've dedicated 2 decades of my life to this force. I've sacrificed so much, and this is how you repay me." His plea was a raw, anguished cry, a desperate attempt to cling to the remnants of his career and identity, only to be met with the stark finality of Elaine's decision. Elaine's voice was soft but laden with gravity as she addressed Tom, her words cutting through the tension like a knife. "And in those 20 years, she asked quietly, how many innocent lives have you ruined? How many people have suffered because of your prejudice?" Each question seemed to carry the weight of a lifetime, pressing down on Tom with a crushing force. His defiant stance faltered, and his shoulders slumped as the full impact of his actions began to seep into his consciousness. The realization of his moral failings and the suffering he had inflicted weighed heavily on him, leaving him exposed and broken. As Elaine turned to call for backup over the radio, a small crowd had begun to gather nearby. The scene was electric with the buzz of onlookers, many with phones out, capturing every moment. The spectacle of a corrupt officer being exposed by the very person he had attempted to frame was quickly becoming the focal point of a viral sensation. The gravity of the situation was not lost on anyone. The unfolding drama was set to ripple far beyond the immediate scene. Jenny, still reeling from the whirlwind of events, looked up at Elaine with a mixture of remorse and gratitude. "Captain, I'm so sorry for not speaking up sooner," she said, her voice tinged with regret and self-reproach. Elaine turned to her, her expression softening as she placed a reassuring hand on Jenny's shoulder. "You did the right thing when it counted, Officer Thompson," she said, her tone warm with understanding. "That's what matters. Sometimes it takes a moment of courage to make a difference, and you showed that courage when it was most needed." Her words were both a balm for Jenny's guilt and an affirmation of the integrity that had ultimately triumphed in a moment of deep crisis. As they stood together waiting for backup to arrive, both women were acutely aware that this moment marked the beginning of something far larger than the immediate confrontation. The unmasking of Captain Davis had ignited a spark that would set the stage for a far-reaching and inevitable reckoning, one that would compel their department, and indeed their entire city, to confront and address the deep-seated issues of racism and corruption that had long festered beneath the surface. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder, the wail of the emergency vehicles echoing through the streets and heralding the arrival of reinforcements. For Jenny and Elaine, this was no longer merely about a single traffic stop gone awry. It had evolved into a critical flashpoint for the community's long-simmering grievances and frustrations. This moment was poised to become a defining event, a powerful catalyst that would reshape the relationship between the police and the very people they were sworn to protect and serve. As the sirens drew closer, the gravity of the situation settled over them both. The eyes of the city were upon them, and the larger world was on the verge of taking notice. The stakes had never been higher. This was not just a confrontation, it was a pivotal juncture that would demand accountability, provoke necessary changes, and hopefully pave the way for a more just and equitable future. In the face of this monumental challenge, Jenny and Elaine stood united, their resolve fortified by the knowledge that their actions in this crucial moment could have profound and lasting implications. What an intense and eye-opening journey we've witnessed today. From a routine traffic stop to a dramatic confrontation, this story has shown us the profound impact of standing up for what's right and the courage it takes to challenge injustice. We've seen how a single moment of integrity can ignite change and hold those in power accountable. Now, we want to hear from you. What have you learned from this story? How will you apply this lesson in your own life? Share your thoughts and insights in the comments below. Your perspective might inspire others to take action as well. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more content like this.